All right, let's get started. The absolute cornerstones of biology, the principles of inheritance. We're going to talk about how traits, eye color, height, all of it, get passed down from one generation to the next. This was a puzzle that people wondered about for thousands of years until one monk, working in a garden, finally started to crack the code.
So, here's our game plan for today. We'll kick things off with the basic ideas, the real foundation of it all. Then, we'll walk through Gregor Mendel's incredible experiments. From there, we'll lay out his famous laws of inheritance, touch on a few of the complications, because it's biology, there are always complications, and we'll wrap up by looking at the amazing legacy of his work.
Okay, so before we can even get to Mendel's pea plants, we've got to make sure we're all on the same page. We need to build a solid foundation by looking at the core concepts that really drive the whole science of genetics.
First up, the big one, heredity. It's really just the process of passing traits from parents to their kids. For centuries, people saw this happening all around them, right? In their own families, with their crops, with their animals. But how it worked, that was a total mystery. Understanding heredity is step one.
But then you have the other side of that coin, variation. This is all about why offspring are different from their parents. You see, if heredity explains why you have your mom's nose, variation explains why you're not just a carbon copy of her. It's the engine of individuality.
And you can really boil it down to this simple comparison. Heredity is the force for similarity, passing things down the line. Variation is the force for difference, mixing things up. And the entire science of genetics is really the story of how these two forces dance with each other.
So how did we go from just noticing this stuff to actually understanding it? Well, that brings us to our main character, Gregor Johann Mendel. He's called the father of genetics for a reason. And his genius was in his choice of subject, the humble garden pea plant. That simple choice would change everything.
He started with a really elegant experiment. It's called a monohybrid cross, which just means he was looking at one trait at a time, in this case, plant height. Step 1, he took a plant he knew was purebred tall and crossed it with one that was purebred dwarf. This is the P, or parental generation. Step 2, he just watched to see what their offspring, the F1 generation, looked like. And then step 3, he let those F1 plants pollinate themselves and observed their offspring, the F2 generation. Simple, right? But the results were revolutionary.
And this is what he saw. It must have been mind-blowing. In that first generation, the F1, every single plant was tall. The dwarf trait, it just vanished. It was gone. But, and this is the amazing part, when those tall F1 plants reproduced, the dwarf trait popped right back up in the F2 generation. It hadn't disappeared after all, it was just hiding.
But here's the real genius, the discovery that changed everything. When Mendel actually counted the F2 plants, he realized this wasn't random, not at all. He found a pattern. For every one dwarf plant, there were about 3 tall plants. A clear, predictable, mathematical ratio, 3 to 1. And you can see it right here, plain as day. 75% of the plants were tall, 25% were dwarf. This wasn't guesswork anymore. This was math. And that told Mendel that whatever was controlling these traits, it had to be following some kind of predictable rules.
And based on these incredibly consistent results, Mendel is able to come up with a set of fundamental rules. These rules are what we now call his laws of inheritance, and they are the absolute bedrock of modern genetics.
Okay, so his first law is the law of dominance. He figured that traits must be controlled by these little discrete units he called factors. We call them genes now. And these factors, he said, they come in pairs. Now here's the kicker. If you have a pair with 2 different factors, one of them, the dominant one, completely masks the other one, which he called recessive. This was the perfect explanation for why all those F1 plants were tall. The tall factor was dominant over the dwarf factor.
So that explains the F1 generation. But what about the F2? How did the dwarf trait come back? Well, that's his second law, the law of segregation. This says that when an organism makes its reproductive cells, its gametes like sperm and egg, its 2 factors for a trait get separated. So a parent only passes on one of its 2 copies to each child. They don't blend, they stay separate. This is why a hidden trait can reappear generations later.
And he didn't stop there. His third law, the law of independent assortment, came from looking at multiple traits at once. For example, he tracked seed shape and seed color, and what he found was that the inheritance of one trait had absolutely 0 effect on the inheritance of the other. Whether a seed was round or wrinkled was completely independent of whether it was yellow or green. It's not a package deal. Each trait is inherited on its own terms.
Now, Mendel's laws are brilliant. They're foundational. But of course, biology loves to throw us a curveball. As we're about to see, sometimes the rules can get a little more complicated.
So where do new traits come from in the first place? Well, a major source of that is mutation. This is basically any change in a DNA sequence. It can be super small, like a single letter in the genetic code getting swapped, a point mutation, or it can be a huge change to a whole chromosome. While heredity is all about passing on what's already there, mutation is what creates something brand new.
And this is where it all gets very real, because this isn't just about pea plants. This is about us. Lots of human genetic disorders are Mendelian, meaning they're caused by a mutation in just one gene, and they follow these exact inheritance patterns. Things like cystic fibrosis, sickle cell anemia, hemophilia. These are all direct consequences of the laws Mendel figured out in his garden.
And that brings us to our final stop, the legacy of all this. It's almost impossible to overstate the impact of Mendel's work. It literally stretches from his quiet garden experiments all the way to the cutting edge of modern medicine.
And that really is the heart of it all. Those simple experiments didn't just explain peas, they unlocked a universal code of life. He laid the foundation for understanding how heredity works in everything, from bacteria to blue whales to you and me. It was the start of a revolution that is still going on today.
So, Mendel took the age-old mystery of heredity and turned it into a predictive science. He gave us an answer to a question people had been asking forever. Which leaves us with a pretty exciting question to think about. Now that we have that answer, what incredible mysteries will the next generation of geneticists solve?